while it is still too early to make any definitive conclusions, especially considering that the author one will likely put a clever twist on these archetypes for comedic effect, as he always does, I still want to point out some of the interesting symbolism that has been appearing in the latest chapters of One Punch Man, mostly just so I can later say see I told you so. This video will use a lot of convoluted vocabulary which might not mean much to you if you aren't already aware of some of the occult Gnostic principles. I simply don't have enough time to explain all of that in every new video, although I'll try to at least cover the basics, and I already made a video explaining these concepts in further detail, although in context to the Xeno series of video games, which you'll find a link to in the video description, so you can always check that out if some things in this video aren't clear enough. It's also worth pointing out that I haven't catched up with the webcomic yet, so I don't know if any of this stuff has already been addressed there. If this makes you not want to watch this video because I just outed myself as a filthy plebeian, so be it. So without further ado, let's go. Perhaps the best place to start with is the cover art for chapter 139, which really encodes most of what I'll be talking about in this video, but let's dismantle it one step at a time. The mirror images of the astronaut and deep-sea diver is symbolic of the occult principle of as above, so below, which simply means that the laws of the microscopic and macroscopic are both identical, and further extends to the laws of the earthly realm and the heavenly abode. A common symbol associated with this law is the pyramid and inverted pyramid, or simply put, pointing up and pointing down. This will actually come into play later. The black cube is a symbol of the physical world, but for now I'd rather focus on the eye and moon imagery. The moon and the all-seeing eye, the Eye of Ra, are both symbolic of enlightenment, through their association with the feminine principle, the Gnostic wisdom goddess Sophia, who is herself associated with the Holy Spirit, Shekinah, and similar religious archetypes of a female deity. The Sophia archetype is then further divided into three aspects, which are also what the three faces of Eve concept refers to. These three faces are the mother, the lover, and the whore, which are associated with Eve, Mary, and Lilith respectively. In One Punch Man, these are embodied through the three psychic women, Tatsumaki, Fubuki, and Sikus. Basically, the three aspects of the feminine principle refer to their role in purifying and enlightening the male principle, which is a psychological mumbo-jumbo about breaking down the masculine aspect and shedding the earthly corruption or sin from it. All of this is heavily tied into alchemy and the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, which I already covered in another video, but for the sake of this video we don't have to go into more detail. It is also worth pointing out that feminine and masculine in this context simply refer to the dualities rather than literally man and woman. You could also call it plus and minus, and it would have the same meaning. For example, one aspect is simply the conscious and the other the unconscious part of a human. The anima and animus, which are symbolized by the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ, as physical representations of these metaphysical aspects. Christ, the animus, being the subconscious of the woman, and vice versa with anima for the man, which is why the entire thing also heavily ties into Jungian psychology and the concepts of ego, id, and superego. For example, Saitama, the one who has removed his limiter, is also the character who physically touched the moon, and symbolically opened the third eye on it by creating the eye-shaped craters, which is symbolic of him making contact with his shadow or id, the anima or divine feminine aspect, which symbolizes his enlightenment, which is represented through the removal of his limiter. Similarly, the implied or rather teased relationship between Saitama and Fubuki also reflects on the union of Christ and Mary. Mary being symbolic of the physical avatar for Sophia, in this case the younger sister of Tatsumaki, who herself is being heavily associated with Sophia. The imagery of the last couple of chapters has heavily associated Tatsumaki's abilities with moon imagery. This is very interesting considering the moon's connection with the Gnostic wisdom goddess Sophia. Basically, the belief is that the moon serves as a mother figure to Earth and is also the first stepping stone out of the earthly prison reality, but more on that later. While Tatsumaki and her powers are symbolic of the moon and thus by association with the Gnostic Sophia. Siccus on the other hand would be the Lilith figure, the horror aspect of the three faces of Eve, or in other words also the horror Europa riding the bull at the Tower of Babel. This is probably the most obvious piece of imagery, as Siccus is riding the bull or Satan, the demon king Orochi, who is also implied to be the snake in the Garden of Eden, at the Inverted Monsters Association, which has now taken the form of a giant spire of Babel. This tower, which was created by Tatsumaki as she pulled the association out of the earth, now points directly towards the moon, as if it is trying to connect the two, as above, so below. The visual here being that the tower is trying to pierce into the divine realm by making contact with the feminine principle, Orochi becoming psychic. In line with the as above so below principle, the bottom of the spire also hides away a black cube that allows contact with a male deity, so the black square masculine principle below the earth is contrasted with, and trying to connect with, the white sphere feminine principle above the earth. And Siccus' ability, which she says has been granted to her by a deity of the black cube, is also unleashed with the gesture of the up and down pointing pyramid. So with that out of the way, what exactly are these black cubes? The black cube, the Saturn cube, or the tetragrammaton, is a symbol of the physical world and tied to the Gnostic false creator of the physical world, the Demiurge both. To make a long story short, basically the belief is that the physical world was created by a lesser deity roughly identical to a Satan figure, which was accidentally created by Sophia, who is herself a lesser emanation of the true god Monad. Sophia then descended down into the physical world with her cohort Logos to redeem the creations of the Demiurge, also known as humans, and awaken them to their own spirituality, which is the divine spark of the Monad hidden inside them. Then the Demiurge created humans, but basically the first wife of Adam, Lilith, cocked him and ended up banging the Demiurge instead, so it's like a reverse Oedipus complex thing, and she's like the Whore of Babylon figure later, or something like that. It's really fucking convoluted nonsense, which is referenced by Siccus the Lilith fusing with Orochi, who is like the physical manifestation of the cube god thing as the big bad super monster. It's a lot more convoluted than that and heavily ties into Jungian psychology, astrology, alchemy, hermeticism, theosophy, and all that nonsense, but that should be enough to cover the absolute basics. It's really just a very insane philosophy which tries to unify a whole bunch of different religions into something that sort of kinda makes sense, but not really. Although I must admit that it is a great tool for writing stories, which is probably why you see its influence everywhere, since it just tries to connect ancient writing tropes. Blast appears to be symbolic of the Adam Kadmon, which basically refers to the original human blueprint untainted by the Demiurge. This is why Blast appears as the spark within the black hole, with the black hole's design being very reminiscent of Saturn, the planet associated with the black Saturn cubes and the Demiurge. His gravitation manipulation powers also being symbolic of him being above the restrictions of this false god's reality. Blast being absent from the hero's association due to his hobby of collecting the cubes, also makes Saitama the proxy avatar of Blast within the physical world and the hero association, since he is the totally busted and overpowered one. As Blast is too busy being occupied with this false deity, his absence is also symbolic of the divine spark being trapped within the black cube. Hence, as the strongest hero, Saitama serves as a quasi-Christ figure, or the Buddha rainbow body, the physical embodiment of the enlightened man, which is very fitting considering that he is the character which not only touched the moon but also created the Ionet, which is symbolic of mankind reconnecting with the divine, the Sophia wisdom goddess that tries to redeem them. This is also the same occult idea as the moon landing, the idea being that technology is a manifestation of divine wisdom, and by using it to reach the moon, mankind has rekindled its connection to the higher realm. The importance of Tekken, or applied wisdom, is also very prevalent in One Punch Man, as during the fight with Siccus Orochi, the technologically enhanced cyborg characters Genos and Drive Knight play a huge role in the battle, helping the divine female principal Tatsumaki to fight the corrupted Lilith figure. Siccus fused with the Demon King, the physical avatar of the Demiurge, and with the help of this Tekken the human characters to featuring corrupted principle. All the while, the fight choreography displays this imagery of the ascending double helix or DNA strand, which is symbolic of the evolution of mankind through technology into a higher being, or in this case the tactical wisdom of becoming a promoted rook, ascending beyond a normal rook or human through technology. However, Genos and Drive Knight aren't even the most interesting characters here, because that would actually be Sweet Mask, who has some very interesting things going on with him. But to understand that, we first have to go back to Blast. As previously mentioned, it last serves as the Adam Cadman figure, the divine blueprint so to speak, of which Logos and Sophia are really just the male and female aspect. Or perhaps we could see him as the Gnostic Lucifer, the person that awakens mankind to their divine spark, because Christ in the Gnostic sense is not really a person but rather the state of consciousness of a person that has become enlightened to the divine spark within them. This would also explain why Blast is making the devil horn gesture as he emerges from the black hole. Anyways, the two characters we have seen so far that have made contact with Blast in the past are Tatsumaki and Sweet Mask. I already explained how Tatsumaki is representative of the feminine principle which was awoken through her contact with Blast, who saved her and led her down the hero path, which would be symbolic of the Lucifer figure awakening the divine spark within her. In that case, his contact with Sweet Mask should have had the same result and released the male principle within him. But looking at his inverted cross necklace and the fact that he is a superstar loved by all, Sweet Mask is likely actually going to have an Antichrist sort of role later on in this story. This would also put Zombie Man's quote about them all just being humans into a whole new light. However, there is still Garou, who is actively turning away from the light, which is also why we see the crescent moon above his transformed state, symbolizing his turning away from the opened eye, which also contrasts him with Saitama, who opened the moon's eye in the first place. So since Saitama is obviously the enlightened Christ figure, the man who has removed his physical limiter, you'd think that Garou is going to be the obvious Antichrist archetype. But as it looks now, Sweet Mask is strangely suspicious, though Antichrist doesn't refer to just one person either. But that's what I meant when I said it is too early to make sense of everything that One and Murata are setting up here just yet. However, I hope I at least made it clear that there is a lot more going on in One Punch Man outside of simple haha funny man punch hard jokes. One wouldn't be nearly this great of a writer if he wasn't fully aware of these archetypes, and how to subvert them for comedic effect. I hope with this video I at least made you appreciate One Punch Man just a tiny bit more. If I had to guess, the final punchline of the series will be how boring enlightenment and godhood are. Boomer Blast is just running around chasing monsters to keep himself occupied because the real world low-level stuff is completely boring to him. Evolution requires strive, as Drive Knight said, and so does entertainment, and the lack of this strive has been the joke with Saitama from the very start. So the series will probably end with Saitama and Blast fighting on a scale completely beyond what the other heroes can even perceive. For the other characters and the readers, it will just look like Saitama and Blast standing there and doing absolutely nothing, putting everybody else in the shoes of Saitama, and I think that would be the ultimate punchline on as above, so below. Thanks for watching.